Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show, the Extreme Sci-Fi Special Edition, where we're going to be talking about the 1993 release of Body Snatchers. I'm your host, Rob. I'm coming to you just west of Orlando, Florida, and Central Florida, in the Pine Hills Palace, deep in the underground bunker in the control room, and I'm waiting for the real Dr. V to make a presentation here tonight with us. He's snowbound and may not be able to make it. This is a movie that and I had talked about doing because he had seen this. And anybody that knows Invasion of the Body Snatchers, here she's kind of a tomboyish type character, and you see the residual 80s leftover stuff going into the 90s when it comes to the way they dress, the way they talk, and the way they act. But as far as the movie goes, it's pretty faithful to the original source material with a little bit of 90s cheese thrown in. I think for this movie, starting off, most people probably at this point know what the story is about, which is aliens have come to Earth. They are trying to take it over by seeding up the Earth as they would by putting these pods in. And so the first two movies, and of course this third one here, has scenes of where eventually you see if you go to sleep, that's usually when they take over because then they can kind of like get their tentacles into you and then make a duplicate of you and then use what's left of you over for the energy sources, and it's like a real quick turnaround. So without trying to compare it to the other two in terms of what's great, what's bad, and what's different, if you haven't seen all three, we're just going to talk a little bit specifically about some of the scenes in this film. So for me, seeing this movie, one of the first horror movies I saw as a kid was the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the 50s. And I kind of, as a kid, wasn't sure what was going on. And then I remember seeing it not too much later after that, and then seeing pretty close to the Donald Pleasance version of it, which kind of freaked me out. It was the first time I had ever come across what you would call the hive mind concept, which is if four or five of us are all connected, we can somehow understand what each person's thinking. We're directed by one simple thing. And it's a term that comes from nature, where some insects would operate that way. Good evening, Dr. V. I sent a link from where I'm at. Let me know if you can get in there. Just got started a moment ago. I understand you were snowbound there a bit. So we'll see what happens there. I'm going to check and see if you got in, or come in when you can, I should say. So, the hive mind concept is really interesting because it's not the direct form of communication that you would have between two humans, let's say verbal, nonverbal, that sort of thing that you've become accustomed to. And certainly males converse kind of differently than females converse, and also male, female converse differently. But in the natural world, there's different forms of it. And if you don't know what this movie's about, I've already explained to you it's about aliens taking over. I really appreciated the fact how in this movie they tried to stay pretty true to it. You start off by seeing this family that's going to this military base in the South, and the whole idea is that this guy works for the EPA, and he looks like one of these leftover transformative bedwetting liberal types because he looks like a do-gooder. He's got the gold round glasses, and he's remarried to a young McTilly, and then they have two kids. They have a very young son, and then they have this teenage daughter who's probably about 16 in here. Now, I gotta say that I would say that for me, it's pretty interesting because for Gabrielle Anwar's character, she comes off as a tomboyish. And the real first question I have is who are you supposed to really like in here? This is the tough part that I actually had with it. Doctor, I'm going to send you a link again. This is the one that says where I'm at. I just posted it back there for you. Let me know if that works, obviously. But for her, it's hard to really like a lot of the characters in here. The little kid is pretty interesting because he's got kind of a punchable face. He's not a cute kid. He's not ugly. He's got this mean expression, and he doesn't like his daughter, and kind of has a new mom and all that. So they get settled into this army base, and he's supposed to check out some contaminants, some samples. And of course, this we all know is going to lead into the pods. And so the question really is how are they going to show us people getting taken over, the paranoia of falling asleep? Are they going to do it a lot? Are they going to do it a little? Are they going to try to turn it into an action film? I mean, we're going to get to all that here too. So, Doctor, I'm going to go ahead and check and see if you got that link again. So with the movie, um, pretty quickly you find out that the girl's going into the bathroom as they're traveling to the army base, and there's this army soldier in there, and he puts a knife to her throat, and he's like, you can't fall asleep, they're gonna get you, basically. And he freaks out, she freaks out, and she leaves. And then there's a cool scene a little bit after that where she's kind of, once they get to the military base, she's just walking around checking things out. She's walking by a fence, and some soldiers approach her, and she's feeling freaked out, and she had stepped on something, and then this other girl who happens to be the daughter of the guy who runs the place shows up, and they drive off, so you have your girly moment. But then the soldiers are left standing there, and you're like, okay, are they aliens, are they the real deal? And you look down, and what she had stepped on and didn't realize it looked like it was a jawbone, so it was kind of cool. So the movie does a good job of having some scenes in there. I don't know how good of a job it does of building paranoia, because by about 30 minutes in you already start seeing a transformation, so they don't really straight out. But what I will say, that one thing that they've done well in this film is they've really, I felt, were did a good job of being honest to the source material. So you're going to get scenes in here where the aliens start screaming and they're letting the other aliens know what's going on. You're going to get a scene or two of them trying to hide among them during the big action scene at the end. You've got Arlie E. L. You got the Mr. Ermey guy from all the war movies who's in here too as the base, and he kind of tones it down a little bit. Um, so anyway, it's one of those things where when you're watching it, you're going, wow, these actresses are really young. The guy you don't know anything about. And for the movie itself, it's okay. It's not one that I even actually remembered from the 90s. But at the middle of the movie here, she teams up kind of with the girl that was driving the car, who's, again, kind of like the bored kid of the Army base captain. And they go to a bar, they meet some guys. She meets a pilot, of course, which is going to be another main character. But really, to me, this whole movie revolves around two things. When the aliens actually start taking over people and they show it, it looks like spaghetti going into their nostrils and all over their face. So it's really kind of weird looking. It seems kind of silly and stupid, but somehow it works. It's effective. It's one of those situations where it's like a less is more type of thing, where they don't go crazy with the effects, but because of the tension that builds up and you kind of know what's coming, it seems acceptable enough. And some of the practical effects of the corpses kind of decomposing rapidly are pretty neat, and even the pods in the water, that's like in this little pond out in the back, is pretty neat too. There's also a good little scene here too where the kid is basically freaking out because he knows my mommy died, my mommy's not me anymore. And right before that, as they focus on the kid, he's in the school with the other kids and the lady who's teaching them. And this is where you find out pretty early on that most everybody on the base is actually an alien. They're all drawing a picture and they hold it up and it looks like intestines or something. I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be. And then a little kid, who again is not the most photogenic one in the world, he holds up his own picture, which is not what they have. And he's like, they're all trying to get in my mind. And you're like, hey, this is kind of cool. This is kind of neat what they're how they're trying to do it with the movie. But it's not a very big budgety movie except for some explosions. It looks like that's where about 80% of the budget went to, because once they start realizing that things are going on, they try to leave. And then, of course, the moms had already been taken over, and she lets everybody know what's going on. So it gets kind of like be like an action piece in the third act, which, the Top Gun character, the Tom Cruise wannabe, he picks her up. They actually gets into a copter because he's a helicopter pilot, and they fly away. And there's some voiceover work with it, kind of talking a little dystopian sounding. But then they turn around at the end, and they just fire all the missiles from the helicopter to try to blow up the base and at all the jeeps that are taking off going to all these different army bases that they'd went to. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's okay. It's not a bad film. I call it the millennial version of it because, again, I say, who are we supposed to root for? And it's kind of like a broken home situation. And if we're supposed to be rooting for the teenage daughter, she's not hateable, but she just acts like a teenage girl. She's not particularly smart or resourceful. She's just sort of there. And the kid's kind of cool. And one of the very last scenes, unfortunately, when you start marking out for the little kid because he's got some cool lines and some cool scenes, is they're in a helicopter, the Top Gun guy, the teenage girl, and the little kid, and it turns out the little kid had gotten turned and he managed to make it into the plane. And the kid actually goes after the helicopter pilot and tries to kill him. He's trying to choke him out. It's really kind of silly, but it's kind of neat the way they did it. And he starts yelling to the teenage girl, "Hey, you've got to throw him out. It's just us. You've got to throw him out." So she's trying to throw her little brother outside of the helicopter, and she actually does it. And there's a scene where the kid, you see the kid falling out of the helicopter, and he's pointing out, screaming, which they show like 3 different times in this film. So that's kind of like an homage to the, like I said, at least the '78 version that we always think of with Donald Pleasance and his face when he's doing it, and it's kind of creepy. But they end up landing in Atlanta, and I don't think it's very clear whether it's supposed to be a happy ending or a sad ending. You know, the book originally that came out had a bit of a happy ending to it, kind of War of the Worlds ish, a little bit. But then the other 2 movies weren't really a happy ending, so this one was kind of like a mixed bag for that. So to me, it's one of those movies where if you're in the mood for body snatchers, but you've seen the other films, or you want a little dose of paranoia, this is okay. It'll satisfy it. I don't know if I would put this as the as better than the '78 or even the '56 version of it, but it's not bad, and it does a good job of building up some tension to it while you're watching, even though you probably are aware of what the story is and what's supposed to happen. It is good to watch how it unfolds. So I would say it's definitely worth a watch. It's not the best thing out there. They don't go too hardcore into the sci-fi, but the whole thing about the movie that really makes this different, one of the better earlier on paranoia type movies, is simply that they took this idea of the hive mind from nature, they put it in with aliens seeding it, and when the first time you see it, it's like a whammy because you've never experienced it before, but then here you are watching it and you're going, okay, I know pretty much what's going to happen, just how are they going to do it differently. And that's okay. So it's not a bad movie. It's got some good explosions to it. This is one of the films that the doctor and I were talking about seeing, and he mentioned this is his first exposure to it. So I was curious to see what his thoughts are on it. I'm gonna go and check and see if I can get him in channel again. I know we haven't actually been able to connect. Something's going wrong. He's been snowbound, and something with the Hangouts doesn't appear to be working, or we're not in the right one. So we shall see. I'll take that for one moment, and if not, we'll call it a night. So one moment, please. All right, well, there you go. That's pretty much going to be it for Body Snatchers 1993. If you stick around at 8 o'clock, we're going to be doing a review show, a rip show as we call it, because we had 2 big actors pass in the past week recently. Kirk Douglas, as everybody knows, passed away, but also Robert Conrad from the Wild Wild West. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about both of those guys and sort of reminiscing on it. I think the doctor knows about some Kirk Douglas movies and whatnot, but not too much about Robert Conrad. I'm a big Robert Conrad fan, so we're going to be taking a look at some of those. So, Ed, thanks for listening. Dr. V, I'll come check you out if you're listening here in a moment, see what's going on. But for the rest of you guys, stay extreme. Have a good night.